the people that, that cover our game and talk about our game on a day-to-day basis on everybody. I mean, that responsibility, it's just weird. It's weird energy.
I know that ain't who I think it is.
Giannis Antetokounmpo would have 250 points in a game in the 70s.
Flashback.
There's nobody that's going to average 50 in our league.
Nah.
Okay, now that's just disrespectful.
And that's no disrespect. It's no disrespect. But, seriously, Kyrie Irving.
They would have called him a witch.
It's weird energy.
When it comes to the modern-day NBA superstar, these guys of the past decade have become increasingly more sensitive, more passive-aggressive, and of course, more hypocritical. And looking at LeBron James kind of personifies all those traits, being passive-aggressive, sensitive, and of course, hypocritical. As LeBron a few weeks ago, he was openly whining, complaining to the media, they're too tough, too harsh on players today, and older fans are just too negative. Now, that's LeBron James 1 week, but give it 2 weeks, 3 weeks time, and LeBron James does the exact same thing in reverse, talking about past eras.
Giannis Antetokounmpo would have 250 points in a game in the 70s.
Stop it. Get some help.
That right there is the biggest problem with LeBron James. In his world, he can do no wrong. He can say whatever he wants. He can trash any player he wants, any era he wants, and get away scot-free. But if older players, even older fans, heck, even current fans like myself, call out him for his BS and nonsense, we're being too negative, that's out of bounds. If you think the NBA media is so negative, the coverage of basketball is so negative, why do you go on ESPN national platform and pour kerosene on the fire? Now, while LeBron does this, he's not outraged by negativity, that's all a front. What LeBron James wants to do is set his own narrative and have things his way. If you're talking about his era, his NBA that he's destroyed, you can't say anything about it. But the 90s, 80s, 70s, go back however far you want to, all those eras, it's open season. And look, when discussing different eras, different players' skill sets, yes, some guys, they were born too early or born too late. Someone like Okafor in 2015 being a top 3 pick, being a big man post-up center, he was born in the wrong era. Someone like Pistol Pete, the exact same thing for the 1970s, as back at his era, being flashy, showing off, shooting long distance twos, that was off limits, not acceptable. There are certain exceptions, certain caveats for various players over different eras, but I think virtually every fan can agree on one thing. The past eras are building blocks for our current NBA should not be downplayed, disrespected, or crapped on national TV.
You see a lot of similarities in players. And, there isn't a move that's a new move. There's nothing that hasn't been done before.
Take me through what you're watching.
What I watched when I was a kid was just watching his body position, how he uses his body, and then how he's freezing the defender and creating space and things like that.
Jerry West.
His pull-up jump shot was absolutely vicious. See, that was just, he was more of a dynamic pull-up shot. See that right there? Work.
So tell me what you knew about Elgin Baylor.
Everything I heard about Elgin, everything I read about Elgin was that he was Dr. J and Michael Jordan before Dr. J and Michael Jordan.
Giannis Antetokounmpo would have 250 points in a game in the 70s.
That right there from Kobe talking about Jerry West, Oscar Robertson, guys who played 30 years before his time. That is called being a student of the game, studying the game. And even someone like Giannis himself. Who did he study just a couple years ago? Hakeem Olajuwon, his post-up moves, his pivots, his jump hook shots. Even LeBron James in the early 2010s, who would he go to for post-move advice? Hakeem Olajuwon. Like I said earlier, each era is a building block, one after the other. And someone like Hakeem Olajuwon, despite playing in the unskilled, untalented 90s, players in the 2010s, even 2020s, still sought his advice, his counsel on those same post moves, those same fundamentals. And if you want to talk 1970s basketball, Giannis somehow scoring 250 points. Look, that era defensively, it was much, much different, and as an offensive player, your job was much more difficult. As of course the way the game was played, it was inside out, not outside in. There was no 3-point line, no 3-second rule. there was armbarring in the post, you could check someone in the lane, and there's no force-out rule for ball handlers. Look, am I saying the 70s was perfect, the best era of basketball? No, I'm not saying that. But compared to the 2020s, our current era, the way basketball is played nowadays, it was much different and much more difficult as an offensive player. And if you want to delve into more of the rules where the game was played back then, someone like Giannis taking his game nowadays and going back to 1971, the moves he pulls off now would not fly in the 70s. As of course Giannis' go-to, the Euro step move, in the 70s would be illegal.
I love it. Here's the pass going the other way to Scott. He comes in deep, comes around his man and ran 18-7.
Him outside, don't let him get to the free throw line, get your team in foul trouble.
Strickland walked with it.
A lot of fans can't grasp that concept. Different eras had much stricter rules than our current time period, and guys pulling off 3-step Euros, 4-step Euros, blatantly traveling today's NBA not being called. Back then, it was called, was enforced, and it was much more restrictive. And one more thing I do want to touch on is the conditions of the time in the 1970s. As back in the 70s, you don't have Nikes with cushion, these air bubbles that make you jump higher. Back in the 70s, you have flat bottom shoes, Chuck Taylors, that you have one pair of for the entire season. After the game's over, you don't have some hydrogen chamber, some full body suit you can get in and reduce fatigue. Back in the day, all you had was ice. And of course, looking at medicine, you tear an ACL, hurt your meniscus, that's a career-ending injury in the 70s. And last but not least, flights and travel back in the day, much harder. You're flying coach with actual people, not first class with drinks, food, etc. And kind of going right in line with that point, one of the biggest obstacles for players back then was playing all 82 games in a condensed schedule. And using Kareem as an example, this guy in 1970 not only played 43 minutes per game, but played all 82 games. And looking at the Bucks' schedule, much more condensed, much harder than the Bucks today. As delving into their schedule, the NBA season started October 18th and ended March 22nd. The Bucks this year started 5 days later and end roughly 3 weeks earlier. So that on its own is a big time factor. Here's one more factor. The 1970 Bucks played 33 back-to-backs and had 9 separate stints of playing 3 games in a row. All those factors right there, schedule, medicine, injuries, fatigue, smoking be allowed in the stadium, uneven floors, shaky rims, all those factors and variables aren't taken into account with these era comparisons. And once again, saying Giannis could just plop in 1970 score 250, the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
He's an idiot.
Now, looking at the flip side, imagine Kareem in the 70s being transported into our current era. He's born in 1984, grows up in our current times. This guy would be stronger, would move faster, would be a better overall athlete due to the times. And of course, the added rest days, better travel, medicine, recovery, all that in the long run would benefit Kareem. Once again, things like that never took into account these era comparisons. And again, for someone like Giannis, a physical freak of nature in our current era, this kind of short time period added 50 pounds of lean muscle. Back in Kareem's time, due to the era, that's simply not happening.
50s locking up. Be honest,
Yeah,
brother.
yeah,
Say
like-
70s, not 50s.
And that's no disrespect. Like, it's no disrespect. But, like, seriously, like, Kyrie Irving. Like,
They would have called him a witch.
So, stopping the conversation right there, much of the Giannis discussion, they're just taking Kyrie as he is and plopping him in the 70s. If we're going to do these hypothetical arguments, you gotta at least have some common sense, some logic. It's not just take a guy right here, put him there. If Kyrie was playing in the 70s, he would have grown up in the 50s, learning 1950s basketball, 1960s basketball. As of course Kyrie today, yes, his handles are fascinating, otherworldly, a great ball handler. But like a lot of players today, Kyrie Irving, he travels, carries, and does things that back in the day would not be legal. And even looking at someone like Allen Iverson back in his time period, he was controversial in the 2000s. And of course, Iverson's crossovers, palming and carrying, that in today's NBA, it looks tame. As for someone like John Morant, his whole game, his whole philosophy is built on carrying and traveling and bending the rules. The 1970s, those things would not fly. So that right there is the end of the video. And once again, comparing eras, if you want to be smart about it, You gotta look at the variables, the nuances, and the finer details of each decade. For LeBron James, doesn't even bother doing that. This guy just says, take player A, put him in this scenario, he'd dominate because reasons. And the funny thing is LeBron James saying that if someone said Jordan today would average 60 points per game, he'd be offended and outraged and push back on that, call it hating. But LeBron does it, completely fine, acceptable, he's speaking facts. That right there is the biggest problem with LeBron James. He's the biggest hypocrite in basketball who doesn't hold himself to any standards. As always, thank you guys for watching, hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you next time.